everyone. Welcome to episode 13 of season 2 of Contact Lost, a podcast about Polish and international competitive scene. And today, unfortunately, I'm abandoned by my trusty co host Joker. However, as usual, I managed to bring an awesome guest to talk about an awesome topic. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we talk big bugs, and I really can't think of a more suitable player to deep dive into Tyranids than the staple of the Polish national team, Vladdi. Hi, man.
Hello, hello.
Thanks for joining me. Good to have you. So, Vladdi, um, let's cut to the chase. It's back for you to Tyranids after a longer
Yeah,
break. You experimented with Chaos Knights. You had a very good run with Gene Stealer cults at some point, and some other factions as well. What made you turn your eyes to Tyranids now?
well, the truth is, I'm not actually coming back to Nades after a long time because I've been playing Nades repetitively during last year, during this year, but strictly on TTS. This is the first time, tomorrow will be the first time I'll be playing Bags live on live tournament in like 2 years and maybe more. But I've been playing the army before both buffs, before Octarius and before today's White Dwarf, for regularly with with some crazy ideas, with Rivener army, with Rivener based armies. So I was in touch with the army. But obviously, when we're talking about competitive playing, bugs are back big time. The Octarius set a power of the army uh, quite high with very, very good, very strong buffs. The abilities that Hanits never had before, like being able to redeploy, like full rerolls to hit, some rerolls to wound, these are things that Needs never had, and suddenly it turned quite good units into terribly good units, and mediocre units into quite good units. So even though, as I said on some of the last time I was on your podcast, they still struggle with old datasheets and the old rules. So the base, the characteristic of the units are not too good in this edition, but those new buffs that sets the army on the level, the totally new level in the top of the meta. And it was like that after the Octarius with new buffs, with synaptic links, quite powerful abilities that work army-wide. And now with White Dwarf, this is getting ridiculous. Um, I already read some reviews of these rules, and the general feeling is that these rules are terribly powerful and even maybe overly powerful. But
So wait. So before we get ahead of ourselves, when Octarius dropped, many people deemed that it's basically supplement Hive Guard
it
and
is.
maybe like one or two more units, but it was about Hive Guard, and you heard about those lists with 12, 18. You've seen Manichima, to take second place. I think it was in Austin with 17. John Lennon with 12, I guess, or maybe six.
Six. I think
Yeah, I
he
think
had
six.
six.
Someone else had 12, but I can't remember who exactly. But the point is, it was all about the Hive Guard. So does the supplement or now this White Dwarf change that, and will other units also play?
Not at all. It does not. It is still mainly Codex Hive Guards, but with new White Dwarfs, there are plenty of units that just skyrocketed into from being, well, okay, to being very powerful. The simple my favorite units among those harpies. Harpies were useless. Well, not useless. I used them in some games on League TTS League games, because to use something different. They were okay, but they lacked a lot of things on the table, especially survivability.
Hmm.
It was difficult for them to survive a turn of enemy shooting with 4+ save, no invulnerable save, and no damage reduction. And now it's completely different. Now in this new stampede, with these new stampede rules, they got -1 damage and 5+ invulnerable save, and you can even buff them bigger. You can give them 4+. You can 1 unit, of course. You can give a unit 4+ invulnerable save from power. You can still give it 4+ feel no pain from power. You can give it transhuman from stratagem. So suddenly, big creatures of the needs got a lot of buffs. So I think it is no longer strictly Codex Hive Guards, but still 2 units of Hard Guards are going to be a core
Hmm.
element of most armies because they uh, they kept these are the basis of Tyranid killing power. All other units are better, much better, and have their uses, but Hive Guards are the things that you kill your opponent's things with.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely. The
uh,
rest of the army is simply keeping the enemy away from the Hive Guard.
or doing other stuff like taking objectives, harassing enemy, shooting units, doing different stuff. But if you really want to kill something, there's nothing in the Train's army like Hive Guards to do that. You can argue that there may be some other units in Tyranid's army that can do some things better, like I don't know, Dimacharaon can kill some tough units better because of its high damage. But if you want a steady unit that will put a lot of harm into your opponent wherever he is without line of sight, Hive Guards, well, this unit. This is the unit to kill your opponent army,
Yep. And
and it
is it
stays that
just
way.
one question? Is it still, can we now call it supplement Leviathan, basically? Is it only about Leviathan, or does this Army of Renown work with other Hive fleets as well?
It does work with other high fleets, but not that good. The reason for that is that when you use this Stampede, this Army of Renown rules, you don't get the high fleet adaptation. So no army traits for those units. They still keep the keyword high fleet, but they don't use the adaptation. Therefore, you lose the things that made the fleet special on the codex,
Hmm.
uh, and they do not have much otherwise. Unlike Leviathan, that got a lot of new stuff. And even though the units in the Stampede Army of Renown, they lose the Leviathan Hive adaptation, so they lose Feel No Pain, they still got a lot of new rules, powerful Warlord Traits, powerful stratagems that other Hive fleets do not have. So basically, I think it's obvious that Leviathan is going to be the top dog, still the top dog. Though I'm not sure if the Army of Renown forbids you from taking 2 Hive fleets. I do think so. And therefore, I think this Leviathan is going to be dominating force, and so it is going to be a Codex Leviathan Hive Guards.
All right.
Though, as I said, other units, especially monster units, with these new Army of Renown rules, are going to be very good as well.
Right. So, armies of renown, as we know them, as we've experienced them so far, those are usually the ones where something gets a buff, but then there are certain restrictions for that. What are the buffs here? Can we bite into it? And what are the restrictions? And are those
Well,
restrictions that actually,
maybe.
hinder gameplay? Or
Well, let's
Mhm.
start with restrictions.
Okay.
Uh, you cannot have anything in a whole army that does have one or two wins. So all your units in your army can have only 3 wins per model or more. It is a solid limitation because the Tyranids that were run until now, based on the Octarius supplement, were built around Hive Guards. That was the main killing power of the army, and a lot of one units to take objectives.
Hmm.
Hive Guards and Termagants, Gowns, these are where the units that you took the table with. Yeah, you took objectives from your opponent with that units. These are OPSEC units, so they could do it easily. They can move a few times during the turn because of the stratagem, because of the swarm's ability. So they were very mobile. Uh, so it is a solid limitation, though this is a limitation that you can work around. There are different solutions. But basically, you have still access to troop units because you can take warriors. And basic warrior is just 4 points more expensive than Chancellor. So it is not that difficult. You take a 5-man warrior unit and you pay only 85 points for it. So it's not a steal.
Yeah, that's crazy.
It's doable. And moreover, if you take like me a Tervigon, you can save some points in your list to spawn Termagants during the game. They are not in your army when you build it, so they work around this limitation. So you still can play with one unit models on during the game this way, and they can do a lot of things on the table. You can take objectives, they can make Octarius mission and things like that. So you can work around it. It is a solid limitation, but it's not a game breaker. You also have to have you can only have a Tyranids in this army, and I think from a single Hive Fleet more. So this is also a solid limitation considering how many Alpha Strikes there are now in the meta. There are Thousand Suns, there are Grey Knights, and other offensive armies can charge into your forces on the first turn, like some versions of Admech and some Marines. And when you have blips from Chancellor cults, even the small detachment of Chancellor cult detachment, you can protect yourself from that. You can take walkers, you can have sentinels to make a pre-game move to push your opponent's deep strikes away from your lines. You can just use blips to force the opponent to move not farther than 9 inches away from those blips, protecting your main units, your main Tyranids units. This is an important thing when you take an Tyranid army to the competitive tournament. It's an important thing to think about. But you can't take that when you take this army of renown. So it is another major limitation. But I do think that the things you get in return um, are worth it, are simply worth it because the buffs you get in return are huge. And those buffs are simply you get flat 5+ invulnerable on everything in your army. You must understand that Tyranids is an army when only Psychers have some form of invulnerable save, and suddenly you get that invulnerable save on everything in your army, from monsters to other prevents models like Hive Guards. You suddenly have Hive Guards with 5+ invulnerable save, for God's sake. And so you suddenly have things you always wanted, and now you have access to it. And moreover, on your monster units, not only they have -1 damage, so they are suddenly very, very tough compared to what how tough they were a day ago. And they also count on objective their wounds. So how many wounds they have left means how many models there are on the objectives. It's objective. So you can make a great use of that during the game. A Tyranid model with big number of wounds can take an objective unless it is unless there is some objective secured units of the opponent close by. And even that you can work around, because Leviathan has a stratagem that can give 1 unit OPSEC. So you can make an harpy OPSEC, move it 30 inches, and park it on opponent objective and that model will count as 12 model OPSEC.
Annoying.
So it's a huge path. It's a huge path, and it doesn't stop there. There are new powers, and these powers. There's always a situation in Games Workshop gives new powers to an army, and you can always bet. You could, in the past, always bet that one, two, three of those powers are going to be useless. But it is not the case here.
So here they're OP.
There are, I don't think they're OP, but they are useful.
Hmm.
Every single one of them is useful. I don't think they're OP because they just improve your models a bit, but it's an important bit. For example, one of the powers, it gives a model 4+ invulnerable save. So it is a good power, but it is a very good power for single model unit.
Yeah.
It is not that good for Hive Guards, but jumping from you have to remember that the whole army has 5+ invulnerable save, so jumping to 4+ is not that much of a buff. But if you really want a unit, especially that 12 wound OPSEC harpy to survive on an objective, then this 4+ invulnerable suddenly looks very, very nice.
Yeah, it's massive.
And the other power is full reels in close combat. So you have the access to full reels from Warlord Trait from Leviathan, and suddenly you have access to you can give other unit full reels only in close combat, but you can make very good use of it. And the third power is D3 more attacks to a unit, and considering that the monster suddenly got much better, this is also a huge power. For example, flying tyrants, Hive tyrants, they were suffering from a slow number of attacks. You could buff them to have really good characteristics, really good strength, damage, AP, but a small number of attacks meant that if opponent had invulnerable save, their effectiveness was limited.
Yeah, you were
But,
bouncing off your
but
enemy.
suddenly, if you can buff your fire with additional D3 attacks, suddenly he gets a lot better. Of course, it's still a bit random because one attack is not that huge a buff. But if you keep constantly roll, if you can constantly roll about these 2 attacks, this is a huge buff. This is also a huge buff.
So,
So,
so I
all
think
those
there
powers
is.
are
Mhm.
useful, and they can be if used properly, that can change the tide of the battle. So and surprisingly useful powers for the new Army of Renown.
Hmm.
Um, so and this is still not the end. These Army of Renown got also new stratagems,
Right.
and these stratagems, come on. For 1 CP, you when the monster unit from Tyranid Army from this formation charges the opponent, you roll the number of dices that unit have wounds. So if you charge with, I don't know, Harpy, you roll 12 dices. It counts the current number of wounds. So it's not that powerful. You can walk around it. But if
Hmm.
you charge a fully healthy high harpy on the unit, you get 12 rolls. And now, if your strength is higher than enemy toughness, you roll on 3 plus. If it's equal, it's 4 plus. If the toughness is bigger, it's 5 plus. For every roll, the successful roll, you inflict 1 mortal wound. Up to 6, there's a cap at 6,
Hmm.
but still, suddenly, that simple stratagem for 1 CP changes your any monster, from completely useless in combat like harpies to being able to kill 2 rights just like that
Pretty much.
automatically with no save and no ability to come back because it works in charge phase, the stratagem.
Yeah.
So suddenly you can kill 6 wracks, maybe not 6, they have feel no pain, but you can kill a whole unit of 1 wound models uh, simply by looking at them in the charge phase.
Yeah, you could kill
It,
like half of a Vanguard veteran squad without even fighting yet, just
else
getting into the
Yeah,
fight.
it's just it's capped at 6 mortal wounds, but still, it suddenly very cheaply increases the killing capabilities of monster units in this in Tyranid army, in this army of renown. It's a huge buff, and there are other stratagems that are similarly powerful. Well, one of the main stratagems that Games Workshop is spamming everywhere. It's transhuman, yeah, and it's have
Yeah.
one CP transhuman. It's 2 CP when you use it on the unit that has 5 models or 6 models. Can't remember. But if you cast it if you use it on the 1 model unit, it's just 1 CP, so you can use this 1 CP to save your important big creature. Uh, it's another huge thing, really, because you can save your creatures from anything that wants on automatic 2 plus. For all the last cannons, suddenly last cannons in dark lances, in some cases, suddenly gets a lot worse against your big bags. uh, well, I don't think I need to convince anyone that transhuman that you can use on any unit is a good thing. There are some other stratagems that are also quite useful. Maybe not all of them that much. There's a very good stratagem that you can use on monster during a charge, but it's an expensive one. It costs 2 CPs, and it gives you you can use it when charging monster or vehicle, and it gives you plus one to hit, plus 1 to wound, and plus 1 to damage. So if you charge with a powerful Tyranid monster like Warlord or Flyrant or something like that on something, and you really want that dead, then this is a very nice
Mhm.
stratagem to use. Um, there's also some less useful stratagem that gives additional -3 to leadership if you do some damage. And what else? Transhuman, this mortal spam, and what else? I'm just reading the last one. Okay. You get the fight after death. Tyranids actually had the same stratagem, a similar stratagem, but it was used only. It could have been used only on the character units, and now all the monsters can fight after death. And this is a difference from the codex. When they do fight after death, they do that on the top bracket.
Yeah,
So
and it's I think there is this important bit that makes them better than, for example, I don't know, I play Space Wolf, so I can talk about Wolfen, where with Wolfen, you could say they are powerful because they fight after death, but Wolfen have this caveat that they can only fight after death if they haven't fought.
yeah,
And in Tyranids, I think uh, the Death Surge stratagem, because this is the one that we are talking about, I think it doesn't care about that bit. So even
it
if this
does
unit
not.
fought, sorry,
It does not. It
yeah,
does not. So you can spam it if you want it. So so there's that, and suddenly those stratagem when you put them on the top of the stratagems from Octarius, then you have three layers of stratagem to use during your games. You have codex stratagems, mind you. These codex stratagem for needs are actually very, very powerful and very good. Some of them are outdated, but some of them are really good, like Overrun. I don't have to convince anyone that shooting twice or fighting twice is a good stratagem, but there are some other very nice stratagem in Tyranid Codex, and you get another layer of good stratagems and Octarius, from Leviathan Hive Fleet for Leviathan Hive Fleet, and then now you get another layer of good stratagems in this Army of Renown. So there's a lot of stratagems to use, and maybe it's a good thing that you cannot take just a patrol, because you need all those command points, a single battalion or single patrol detachment gives you. So uh, these the Tyranids for a long time suffered from not having those layered abilities
hmm
from different sources,
like all
and
old codexes, yeah.
suddenly in Octarius they got synaptic links, and then they got another layer of rules from these benefits from this Army of Renown, and with this accumulating buffs, suddenly this army is, I think, one of the top armies at the moment, because
Oh wow.
I do think so. Well, let's be honest. You just mentioned at the beginning of the podcast that after the Octarius, top players took Tyranids to different tournaments with good results. Many, John Lennon, some other people, and so the army was actually top, and was playing on top tables on the big tournaments, just with Octarius. And
hmm
now you get this ridiculous another layer of powerful abilities that you have to sacrifice something to take, but it's, I think it's worth it, because it gives you a lot of buffs, a lot of different buffs, and as I wasn't even finished, because there's also new Warlord traits.
Oh yeah, we didn't get to that one. I've
New
seen there
Warlord.
is something like Savage Fury for wolves as well, like exploding sixes or double exploding sixes even.
Uh, well, there are three new Warlord traits, but actually these are things of the lower interest in the whole and this Army of Renown, because you actually have to, I think, must-haves from the Octarius that fill your two spots that you have for warrior traits. You have rerolls, so
hmm
chapter commander role for the needs, and you have redeploy to units. And this is extremely important. I just played the game like 2 days ago with new army with this new Army of Renown rules, and The ability to redeploy to units saved me the game. So basically, I do think that whatever is in this Warlord Traits, new Warlord Traits, um, it cannot compare with those two Warlord Traits from Octarius book. But if we're getting to that, you get a new 6-inch aura, in which all your monsters have additional hits on sixes. You have a Warlord Trait for D3 additional attacks, and you have a Warlord Trait that gives you -1 to hit and improve combat attrition test for opponents
Hmm.
within 3 inches from your warlord by 1. So it's not that powerful. But as I said, the warlord trait for Octarius are so good that those 3, even though they are very quite useful, they probably will not get much joy unless you're trying to build some kind of, for example, killing close combat fly round. You can actually, with those rules, make a quite good fly round with 2 bone swords, with relic that gives you that allows no invulnerable saves against your attacks.
Hmm.
You can improve those bone swords with adaptation to give your fly round 7 strength -4 4 damage flat.
Insane.
You can give it a warrior trait to give it to make it plus D3 attacks,
Hmm.
and you can use also on it power to give it additional D3 attacks, and suddenly you can have around 8-9 attacks that invulnerable saves that hit with -4 damage for uh,
Explode.
and you can even make it explode with Leviathan stratagem. So basically, you can make a decent, if not OP,
Yeah.
killer with those new rules.
So tell me,
And
because one question, because I haven't had enough. I only played Tyranids once, this edition after my comeback. So I don't know whether they have this rule that Space Marines, for example, do, where you can nominate a bunch of unnamed characters to have a warlord trait. Uh,
no,
so you cannot do that in Tyranids.
no,
Oh,
you
it
have
would be
alpha
OP.
alpha beast. You have an alpha beast stratagem that allows your warlord to take another warlord trait. And since it's a Leviathan stratagem, it has to be a Leviathan warlord trait. So
Hmm.
you have one freebie that you can take whatever you want, and you have one Leviathan stratagem that you can have on your warlord, additional one, and that's all.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but for that you need to wait for the codex, I guess.
Yeah, of
Uh,
course.
but I do think that those 2 warlord traits are quite enough.
Well,
Quite
definitely they are
are
sufficient.
quite enough. Well, at least you have some choice to make now, because with this new Army of Renown warlord trait, you can, as I said, create a nice fly round combat beast, and so you have to make those choices now if you do want to go that way, or maybe you want to take those stratagems from Octarius that are maybe a bit more strategic,
Hmm.
especially this redeployment of 2 units. For me as a competitive player, this is a simple choice, because being able to redeploy after the opponent deployed his units is extremely important, and simply can save you games or win you games by itself.
Yeah, I remember when you played Inari, when you played Orcs, I think the redeploy was one of your core mechanics to use. So I'm completely not surprised that you're
Well,
enjoying this one now.
I don't like to use examples from games, because every game is different, and
Hmm.
you can always argue that the opponent made a mistake, and it's going to be difficult to repeat that. But as I said 2 days ago, it saved me a game when I played an aggressive Admech list that was able to deploy the big units of Wrath Stalkers, 9 just from my army. The opponent deployed the big unit of Wrath Stalkers at the flank behind some of those blocking terrain and started the game. So if I didn't have this redeploy, he would have moved close to my units, charge my Hive Guards, charge my Stone Crusher Carnifex, kill them both, or at least kill Carnifex and engage Hive Guards, and they would be useless for the rest of the game.
Yeah,
And I
pretty much.
was able to redeploy those two units on the other flank, and therefore deny my opponent the ability to do something important with those Wrath Stalkers in the first turn. So basically, uh, competitively speaking, this is, I think, the most important warlord trait now for the needs.
Sounds absolutely massive.
And
Mhm.
and those warlord traits from the Army of Renown are not getting close to that. That's what I think.
Okay. So, so let's get into the army itself. Now, taking into consideration, I understand that you're probably leaning more towards the Army of Renown than an ordinary
I
army.
do.
Yeah. So well, let's think first of all CPs. You said there is a ton of stratagems to use.
Yes.
So if you're building a competitive list now. I know that, for example, there is a sparring with Team Canada upcoming, so you
Yes.
probably already have a list on mind. How many CPs will you have at hand to use, and how fast do you burn
Um,
through them?
First, we're playing aspiring against Canada now. I'm playing Grey Knights with my niece, but I'm using old list only Octarius. Let's call it
Oh, okay,
Octarius list because obviously White Dwarf went out day after our pairings, so it will not be used during the pairing.
understood.
I can't say if with the Army of Renown that I will be playing in the future, I will start the game with 11. I will lose only one CP to give another warlord trait to my warlord from
Hmm.
Alpha B stratagem, and that's gonna be it. I think it's a bit different without this Army of Renown. Without it, I take Patrol of Gensler Cult to be able to use blips and sentinels to push Alpha Strikers away. And I take also adaptation on the Tervigon to give it 5+ invulnerable self that Army of Renown gets just by being Army of Renown. But I need to take that on the Tervigon for it to be more survivable, as normally Tervigon does not have invulnerable save. So basically, I start with 8 CPs when I play my needs, based purely on Octarius supplement.
Which is still a decent number.
I can work with that. Yeah, just remember that when I play Octarius-based needs, I have Genslers my army, and Genslers have a nice stratagem in the Codex. When they kill a character, they can use 1 CP to return to me D3 CPs. So of course it can have potential as well. Trait 33% of not doing nothing of doing nothing, but if you roll 2 or 3, you get 1 or 2 CPs back. So you can keep those number of those CPs quite high during the game if you are able to roll high and if you are able to kill enemy characters with strength stealers.
Yeah, so I wanted to ask how reliable is that, and how often does it happen that you do?
Oh, it usually happens. I get to, in most games, I get to roll once per game for
Hmm,
that. Once per game for that. Sometimes I would have rolled if I still had one stratagem to spend, but in the later turns, I usually do not have any stratagems to spend. So even though my gemstones are still killing characters, I don't have CPs to be able to produce more CPs. But usually in the first 3 turns, I am able to use it at least once. Lately, I've been playing against Thousand Sun and Thousand Suns like 2 games in a row, and I was able to use that stratagem in both games.
Oh wow. Okay, sounds good. So now we spoke about CPs and about CP cost and stratagems, but let's talk about maybe building an army. Would you say, because the costs of units I don't think have changed,
No.
are those costs okay? Are you able to take everything that you feel you need, or are the units maybe overpriced?
Mm, it's a difficult question. Based on the data sheets, their characteristics, most of Tyranid units are terribly overpriced,
Hmm.
especially monsters. They're hugely, ridiculously overpriced. When you compare any Tyranid monster, most of them, to like Talos, to things like Talos, or to things like Dread Knights or something like that. They are ridiculously overpriced. But if you take into consideration the rules from this new Army of Renown, then suddenly they stop being ridiculous at all. And this is a very important part about this Army of Renown, because the previous armies that got the Army of Renown, like Admech, like Orcs,
Hmm.
they uh, they actually have a choice, because, for example, Orc vehicles are good on their own. So you have a choice. You can improve them by lose infantry, or take infantry and their keep infantry and still have good vehicles with decent shooting, or use infantry and have even better vehicles. Uh, with Tyranids, you don't have that choice, because uh, those monsters are mostly useless without the Army of Renown. So
Hmm.
you have only a choice to not have monsters and use Hive Guards and one wound models, with basing your army on Octarius, on Leviathan, or you can use monsters. But if you want to use monsters, you have to go for the Army of Renown. There's no other way. As I said, the characteristic data slates are those are very old, and the units are terribly overpriced, and without it, they do not work.
Okay. So what is an example list that you have in your head for the Army of Renown? What would you take, and what is the game plan for that list then?
Now, uh, I'm testing things now. I started testing the army with 2 big units of Hive Guards and Warlord and Terbigon. This is a base. This is a base in both lists. On also the list on Octarius and the list on this Army of Renown. But I took in this Army of Renown 2 Harpies. I find them very useful with the new rules. One Stonecruncher Carnifex and one Barbed Hierodule, and some warriors to have infantry to take objectives, to have OPSEC, just like that, and to be able to make banners mission.
Hmm.
And I also leave 100 points to be able to spam 2 Termagant units out of Tervigon, to have even more infantry, to have, if I really need to be able to make Octarius a mission safely with those units, to be able to use them as a screen. 10 units of infantry have a lot of uses in the game, as long as they are not too expensive. And these termagants are not too expensive, especially that they cannot be destroyed on the first time, because they are produced by Tervigon.
Hmm.
So this is a way, as I said at the beginning, a way to work around this limitation of not having one wound models in the army. I actually can do that by spawning thermagants, but I need to have points reserved in the list for them as they cost points.
Okay. So I remember hearing or listening to some other podcast when Octarius came out, and people were praising lictors for the ability to to easily score, engage, and so on.
Well,
Would you consider them as well, or
well,
not really?
no, I would not. But the reason for that is not based on any of those supplements. It is based on new missions. The missions were changed, and
Hmm.
you cannot. They're basically the lictors are useless when you want to make Octarius data mission because you fail to plus with them, and you cannot do
Engage.
engage with them because you can do that only with 3 model units.
Yeah.
So basically, unless you want to do some shenanigans with preserves, when you want to drop some, I don't know, Devourer Gaunt unit on the table close to the lictor, because a lictor has a stratagem that allows that to happen. Unless you want to do that kind of shenanigans, lictors are useless now.
Hmm. Okay, that's a shame. But on the other hand, there are so many other things that you can take that
Yep.
you know definitely can be skipped. All right. So with that list that you've mentioned, what is the game plan, or how does Vladdi play his Tyranids? Will that be sort of an aggressive play style where you swarm the table? I think it's
Well,
the list is slower than the ordinary
well,
list. So,
is it though?
well, yeah, that's my question.
Is it though? Yeah, it does not have one, or it does not have Reveners or Genestealers to move quickly around the table
Hmm.
and take objectives. But it have, as I said, 12 wound harpy that you can be given obsec and have 30 movement, so it can take any objective from your face if you do not have 12 models on it and obsec on it. So in terms of taking objectives from the opponent, I see an improvement actually, especially that you can buff that harpy defensively so high that he can actually survive on that objective. So the arm is different a bit. It seems slower, but it still can use some of its abilities, harpies, spawning termagants to take objectives from the opponent. Uh, it may be too slow for me now. I have to think it through a bit.
Hmm.
I used one Stonecrush Conifex because it had decent vehicle killing ability, but I do think it is a bit slow. I'm taking it to tomorrow to the live tournament, so I'll be still testing it. But I do think now that those Conifexes are just too slow. I need to figure something else out for them in their place. So it plays a bit different, but for example, what you can do with this new list, you can put things on the objectives and hope it survives. You never were able before to do that with needs. For example, uh, eight ballistari, the last common ballistari, Cognis last common ballistari, 8 of them shot the hero duel in the first turn with all the buffs and did not manage to kill it.
Oh, wow.
And and well, I have 5+ invulnerable save. I have -1 damage, and I can now I have defensive stratagem in form of transhuman. So suddenly this big creature is not that easy to kill without any buffs. And when I start the game, I can give it 4+ invulnerable save. I can give it 5+ feel no pain, and suddenly this beast, when it gets on the objective, it can be an obsec unit as 18 model obsec unit on the objective with 4+
Hmm.
invulnerable save, with -1 damage, with 5+ feel no pain, and suddenly killing it is can be a challenge. It can be really a challenge, especially that can also use transhuman on it, as I said. So the tactic changes. Previously, I used one model unit or rerunners or something, fast-moving units to sacrifice on an enemy objective, taking them away from the opponent. Now I can change that tactic a bit because I have units that can put on the objective with OPSEC and they can survive on that objective. So it's a bit different gameplay, a different game plan. We'll see how it works after a few games.
Yeah, so there is one thing that bugs me still, no pun intended, but one thing that bugs me about this army, and it's the same reason why I don't use my Thunderwolf cavalry, for example, which is huge bases and difficulties with terrain. So how do you overcome that? Because even with the harpies that you praise so much, it's a flyer base. So you say that
Well,
you can easily place that model on an objective, but if the opponent places his units in such a way that you cannot place that huge base, you don't score that objective.
well, first, it's a bit much to say that praise Harpy. I just notice how much better they got.
Yeah.
Okay. Secondly, you were getting into details, and when getting into details, you can say that if an opponent stays have something objective, it's difficult to place a base. Then I respond. Then I kill that thing that permits me from getting on the objective with shooting, and I use Hive Commander ability to move that harpy still on the objective. There's no obviously, an obvious tactic to any gameplay is to block your opponent to get from getting on the objective. It works against any army and any unit. Of course, flyer bases are huge, but still, they only need to get with small part of it on the objective to
True.
take it, right? So honestly, even though I play Barbed Hurdle, I played Barbed Hurdle a lot during last 2 years on TTS, and I rarely had a problem with moving it around the table, and I mean WTC tables that use a
Hmm.
lot of ruins that make it difficult for big units to move around. And I never had a problem with moving those big units around, so I don't think this is much of a problem, really.
Okay, so the army is not very much table reliant. Is that what you're saying?
Well, if you have 12 Hive Guards that you can buff to the limits. No terrain is a problem for you. And if you have, moreover, if you really fast units, either harpies or some infantry, then you can use the stratagem to move around again. Then you can use Swarmlord's ability to move again. Um, these mobility issues fade away very quickly.
Okay, that's great. And now, you are a player that tries to be, from what I see at least, tries to be at as many team tournaments as possible.
Yeah,
Partially because you're preparing to WTC,
yeah.
partially just because, as most pro players, you probably appreciate team tournaments more. So how does this army fit a team tournament setting? Is it a sword army? Is it a shield army? Is it good
Well,
for team compositions?
it's difficult to say because honestly, this Canada Sparring is gonna be the first tournament, first a team play that we are going as a team be playing with Needs Army after Octarius. So I can't reliably answer that question now. It would be unprofessional for me
Mhm,
to say those things without much more testing. And it's not like I'm gonna test needs basically only on Octarius anymore because I'll probably switch to this new formation.
mhm.
And how that is gonna impact the pairings it is gonna to be a mainstay army or attacking army. We're gonna see. I have to think that through.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. So is this an army that can give you the maximum points? Is it like an army that, I don't know, reliably does a lot of 20 zeros in tournaments? And I'm not talking about the Army of Renown because obviously you haven't played that enough yet. But Tyranids after Octarius, is that an army that dominates the opponent, that tables the opponent, or does it win, but like 11-9?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes, if you face an army that have a characteristic um, that have units that your hive guards work good against, that you will be tabling your opponent. Like, I don't know, I played two first games after Octarius. I played against Grey Knights, and they stood no chance. The
Mm,
game was over after 2 turns. I'm killing. If I'm in range, if needs are in range, it's not like I'm doing anything brilliant. It's just dice rolling. I killed 3 Dread Knights per turn, just like that, with with a top.
mhm,
So if your opponent loses 3 Dread Knights in turn and he has 5 in the army, and then he next turn he loses 60% of his infantry, then what a chance that he has.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, but there are different armies that this that have got terribly struggled to destroy. For example, big monsters of Drukhari, Talons, Cronoses. It's difficult to have huge accuracy, so you have problem with destroying them. They have invulnerable save. They have -1 damage because, of course, nowadays those Cronoses and Taloses run with -1 damage. So
Yeah.
you inflict usually 1 damage on them with Hive Guards, and they have 5+ no pain. So it's very difficult to reliably destroy them with Hive Guards, and you have nothing else.
Yeah, and they have
No
grotesques and
other
racks. So
no other units that have a killing power, enough killing power. So you have to play around them. Use this your obsec unit to take objectives from the opponent, and you will not be tabling the opponent. You will be winning, but not by far. It's not gonna be huge wins.
okay. So does this army actually? Okay, first of all, what is this army afraid of? You said Drukhari. Yeah, I've heard about that. So
Dep-
Talos, Kronos,
It,
grotesques.
it depends, but
Uh-huh.
all the needs that I ever played always had problems with armies that can move during psychic phase.
Mm-hmm.
So, uh, fortunately for now, it's not like those armies are best on the tables. Harlequins still play. There are some players who use craft words still. Uh, Chaos is not used that much because nowadays they have limitations to use warp time. You can only cast warp time on your legion units. So, and Chaos Space Marines are not that good an army now. So the use of that is limited. But still, if your opponent has an ability to move again in the different phase than movement phase, then you struggle against it because simply he gets straight into your hive guards and you have no way of protecting them in some effective way. And if those hive guards are not get killed, they get engaged, and you have a few smites to free them. And if that doesn't work, your hive guards unit for more close to 300 points
Mm-hmm.
are doing nothing. So all those armies that have either alpha strike that can move around your defenses or some kind of double movement that can move around your defenses, those armies are a problem.
And Hive Guard probably don't like planes very much.
Well, planes are flyers. I mean, are a unit that can move around your defenses
Yeah.
because you cannot stop them. There's no way of stopping them, so they move to your back door and shoot hive guards with impunity. The problem is with new Army of Renown, those hive guards are quite tough. They have 5% invulnerable save, and you can use a stratagem to transhuman on them, and it's not that easy to kill them no more. So it's just another argument to take Army of Renown, unfortunately, instead of just pure nits.
Okay. So I think, last question that I have is both for those who will be playing against this army and people who want to play this army and maybe could learn something from you. Does this army play the mission well? So what is your choice of secondaries, for
Uh,
example, and how does it play to the primary? I think we discussed primary, but
well, the answer is it depends. It,
as
de-
always.
it, it depends how you build your army. If you play your army to play around those secondaries, then you will be doing secondaries. If you do not, you will not. The simplest example for it is the basic build of needs leans you strongly towards to the last because you have to the last on 2 units of Hive Guards and a Swarm Rotor. These are units that do not quite die quick. If you lose your Hive Guards and Swarm Rotor quick, then you lost the game anyway. So this is an obvious pick. And then there's another, you need to pick something from Battlefield Supremacy because these the secondaries are easy to do, so they can engage all stronghold. And with Hive Guards being able to destroy anything within 36 inches, stronghold seems like a good idea now because you don't have to really sacrifice units playing engage that much. When you take stranglehold, you can just sit on 3 objectives and wipe your opponent from a single objective, and you score your points. And the third one is obviously the most difficult one. If your opponent builds army in a specific way, so you can if you can take like a Titan Hunter or bring it down or assassinate something like that, then you obviously go for it. But if not, then you are left with Octarius data or Rise the Banners, basically, or some kind of warpcraft. But these and I find Warcraft generally all these secondaries from Warcraft very unreliable. So I would go for other banners or Octarius data and try to do Octarius with those spawning Termagants and those warriors that I have, hoping that I will get enough points uh, from it to make it count. But if there are enough objectives on the table, then obviously I would go for Rise the Banners, especially that with this new Army of Renown, you can actually put a lot of models on the objectives because all the monsters in the unit counts every single wound as a single model.
Hmm.
So you put a lot of wounds, so you put a lot of models on those objectives, so you can keep those banners on your objectives without your opponent taking them away from you.
Okay. So I think that's it about Tyranids. I mean, we've spoken about them for an hour, but I still have one question that I also wanted to ask. How do you like the newly announced missions and the changes to them? Are those changes for the better? Are they complicating things unnecessarily?
Uh,
What do you think?
yeah, we talked about that before the podcast. I still don't know because actually, well, if you're talking about those missions that were the changes to the secondaries that we know about, Uh, I don't think they're good. I don't think they're done in the right direction
Hmm.
because they. I do think that they're shifting the balance not in the right direction. They are limiting the use of five model or few model forward units. Those forward units are used, in my opinion, uh, have a generic use in form of taking some kind of objective in the middle, in the no man's land,
Yeah.
sometimes in the opponent, and there are never or almost never objective secured units. They are not troops. They are the fast attacks or allied scouts, like some commandos, things like that. So Reveners, even those units that were very useful previously for being able to take those objectives, like engage, like Octarius, suddenly are not that useful or are completely useless, like lictors. I don't find that change good because tell me, do you recognize before the changes the fact that lictors could make engage, or that I know Reveners, free Reveners could take engage or make Octarius, or that I don't know Crypto Trials could take Octarius, make Octarius on engage. Did you recognize that as a problem for competitive playing?
No, absolutely not.
No, I didn't. I did not either. So what are they fixing?
Yeah, yeah.
What exactly those changes fix? What problems, what OP units those those missions fix? I do not see any. In fact, I was expecting um, a different change. I was expecting a change to take away from flyers, from aircraft, the ability to make engage. That would make sense
Yeah,
because
it would.
I find that a problem for competitive playing. Why the fuck aircrafts do engage? They do not take any other objectives. You cannot do any other objectives with them. Why can you do engage with them? It makes no sense. These are units that are not chargeable, but by the units without fly. So they, for, against some armies, they are unkillable or close to unkillable. Why do they make engage? This I find a problem. You can argue about this role for flyers. Can they make? Should they make engage? This is a problem of discussion. But if you want to find a problem for competitive playing, that would be a problem, and that would be a fix.
Yeah.
I do think that those changes do not fix anything. I cannot find anything they fix. So I do not think they're right. I don't think they're changes in the right direction. I don't think they're thoughtful. That's what I think.
So I did have a think about that as well, and the only thing that those really change is that maybe you'll see a bigger differentiation of units, because now I think bikers can do rod, or
Okay.
vehicles can do, and I mean they always could do engage, but for me, I'm dropping
But
cyber wolves and
think,
bringing in
think,
landspeeder storms, for example. So
think about. Do they really? Those bikes you mentioned, bikes. Does that they were literally can do those missions now, but with those changes, can they really do those missions? They usually have a small number of models,
yeah,
so they do not really can do Octarius data, and they cannot really do engage because they can drop under three models.
yeah, correct.
So does that really change the role of bikers on the table? Really?
Depends.
Yeah, it does depend, but it's not. It doesn't. If you think it through, then you come up with conclusion that it's not an obvious fix.
Yeah,
It's not like you include bikers in the rule, So now bikers are useful. No, they would be useful with the previous conditions to make those missions. But with new, they are not actually useful for those purposes because the other limitation got in and fucked them simply.
Yeah, and they instantly become a
So,
target as well. So
and you basically you proved that by what you said like a minute ago. You did it. You said that you're thinking to drop wolves, and but you didn't want to get your bikes in. You
no,
wanted to get
absolutely
a speeder in
correct.
because it's a vehicle and it can do engage even if it's a one model. Tell
Yep.
me, why model for 50 points a speeder can make objective and a bike for 50 points cannot make engage? Where is the logic in that?
There is none.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah.
So as I said, I do not that changes really good. I
Hmm.
don't see how much how what they actually what they wanted to fix with them, really. Just make a mess.
And how
And
about?
just
Mhm.
one that change that they force players to make unlogical, stupid changes that do not have any sense, in
And
my
how about
opinion.
the changes to the primary?
I actually never did not have an occasion to play with new primaries because uh, they did not come out yet, as far as I know. The only two missions came out, right?
Hmm.
Those from the GT final. If all of them come out, I'll speak about them. We will be playing now with against Canada, one of the missions from GT final with new primaries, and maybe after that I'll have more to say about them. For now, it it really the only change I see with those no primaries is I don't think the thinking about primaries they will change in any way. I do think that making +3 points for primaries for killing 3 units is just stupid. It's not like a real second. It's not like a real addition because it's not a thing you need to think much during the game. You just kill things. You kill things anyway. So I don't think that's a good change. But but I do think that people will do as much from primaries as they did before. The only change is you cannot pick a secondary, a mission secondary because they do not exist.
Hmm.
Therefore, you are more limited to the secondaries you have in the rulebook. And that's a problem because Games Workshop is such a smart beast that did not publish all the codices at once. There are armies that will wait for the codices for, I
God
don't know,
knows how long.
God knows how long. And those armies will struggle more with those new missions with no primaries, new primaries because they will not be able to choose mission secondary. They will have to change to check to take different secondaries, the codex, the rulebook ones,
Hmm.
which are very limited. There were some changes to it made, but still, you actually if your opponent made the army in such a way that it denies you, bring it down, assassinate, and so on, then you are left with one battlefield supremacy mission, and you need to have a way to take shadow operations. And those shadow operations are very sometimes can be very tricky to do. And if you do not have anything to make to the last, then you struggle after first secondary. You struggle with two other secondaries, and this is a problem for the armies that do not have codexes.
Yeah.
So I don't find that change really good right now. Maybe I'll be convinced after a while, but for now I don't see the logic behind it.
Yeah. Maybe just maybe it's too early to say. It would be good to see the whole
Yep,
spectrum of missions. So
yep,
let's wait until
yep.
they release that. So listen, I'm out of questions. I think this was really informative, and I thank you for coming to the podcast and for
Sure,
sharing your
sure.
knowledge.
Hope I didn't bore you to death.
No, 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 absolutely. I mean, I don't know about our listeners, but I was, listening with excitement. So I hope our listeners as well. Listen, I know that you have an upcoming sparring with Canada, so maybe in the future we can talk about that.
Sure.
And yeah, and I'll definitely reach out for an update on how this Army of Renown plays.
No problem. A pleasure.
Yeah.
Always a pleasure.
All right. Then, yeah, I think that's everything. Thanks again. And
Sure.
to our listeners, please, subscribe and follow us on different social media. We're also on all the podcasting platforms, so you can give us a recommendation there as well. We're really counting on it because it helps us grow and increase our reach. So please go and click that subscribe button. We would be much obliged. And with that, I thank you all, and until next time, see ya.
See ya.